A question that I've been getting a lot recently, and not even just recently. This has actually kind of just been happening ever since Project L got first announced. Right? People bring up this question of, is Project L going to change fighting games? Like, is it going to change the landscape of fighting games for the better, for the worse? And so I'm going to do a little bit of a spiel on my thoughts about it. So I've broken this down into three simple parts. First is, the first that I see people bring up a lot is the prizing thing, right? So the idea for a lot of people is that because Project L is a Riot game, you know, Riot has a lot of money. They have a lot of money from League of Legends. They have a lot of money from Valorant. They have a lot of money from TFT, right? They just have, it's a very rich company. It's a very, very rich company. And so the idea for a lot of people is that because they have a lot of money, that means they're going to put a shit ton of money into, you know, fighting games. They're going to have super big prize pools. They're going to do this and that. And I really think that people should probably like hedge their expectations when we talk about prize pools. And that's for a few different reasons. One, they don't need to sink a ton of money into marketing budget for Project L. It kind of like markets itself. Like, they're going to spend money on it, but they don't need to stick $1 million on a prize pool to get you to play the game. You're going to play the game for a bunch of other reasons that I'll go over. They don't need to spend $1 million to get you to sign up for their world tour or whatever circuit they decide to do. You're just going to play the game, right? And so they don't need to sink that money in. They're not in the same position as like a Capcom or any other fighting game, because you're going to play anyway. You're going to play anyway. And so like, I don't think that they're going to go super hard on that end. They're going to probably have sizable prize pools, but like not, I don't think we're going to be looking at, you know, $5 million, $10 million type. That's what people want. They want like big esports type prize pools, right? I don't think that's going to happen, especially if you like look at their other games in their prize pools. Like if we're talking about League of Legends World Championship 2023, 2.2 million, right? And you have to consider that they pay a lot more teams, and teams are also 5 players per 5 players per team, right? On top of that. So it's really not, you know, it's not as insane as you might think. You know, 2.2 million is not that far off from Capcom Cup, which is 1.7, right? 1.7 million for Capcom Cup. So like, it's not that far out. Valorant the same way. Valorant Champions 2023, 2.2 million. Now they do have a lot of tournaments. Like they have a lot of different stages. They have like the Masters and they have the Champions and they have, you know, split by regions. And so like, yeah, it can start to add up in certain cases, but it's not going to be the same way that people think. Like you're certainly not going to be talking about like Dota 2 money or anything like that. And so I really, really hope that people are not like doing it to themselves when they think, because at the end of the day, like I said, the reason that Capcom is able to do $1 million, right? The reason that they do $1 million is strictly to market, right? They're marketing off of the fact that no other fighting game has ever done $1 million prize pool, you know, handing someone $1 million. That's why they decided to do their shitty prize split and give $1 million to first place, even though all the rest of the payouts kind of sucked. It's because they want to be able to say, well, we crowned a fighting game millionaire, right? It's all marketing, not because there's an actual return on doing that. Like you're actually just sinking a ton of money in for not a ton of benefit in that case. And to that end, right, Capcom kind of put themselves in a corner, because now that they've done this whole $1 million the first place thing, they can't really go back, right? They did announce that they're doing it again for the second year. And it's like, okay, now you're going to have to spend at least $1 million every single year from here on, or else people are going to feel disappointed, right? They're going to be like, oh, well, like this, I'm not as hype about this anymore because, you know, the prize pool isn't as big as they were. And you were putting a lot of your marketing strategy into that. So there's that, the prize pool end. Like I said, I think it'll be decent, especially, but like, I don't think it's going to be, I think people are kind of getting a little crazy when they talk about that. But the biggest thing about Project L, right? The biggest thing that Project L will change about fighting games is this free to play thing. This is actually like such a big deal that people I don't think they're really wrapping their heads around like how big of a deal it is that Project L is free to play. No fighting game, especially no fighting game this big, has ever tried this monetization structure. And when we talk about monetization, fighting games have actually been kind of in a rough spot, right? Even the big games, like the big, like culturally moving games, your Street Fighters, your Mortal Kombat, your Tekkens, they've all experienced issues with monetization. Every single one of them, right? Every last one of them has. Street Fighters have the whole like, oh, they're doing 80 million avatar skins, but they're not doing skins for the actual characters. And then the actual skins themselves are super expensive. If you want to buy costume threes, if you want all the costume threes, you have to spend $100, like stuff like that, right? MK, I don't even, bro. Don't even get me started. Don't even get me started on MK monetization. They got dragged for it multiple times, especially around like, the time that Omni-Man was coming out and whatnot. It was like, I think it was like a voice pack for Omni-Man cost more than the character itself or something. Like, it was like something insane. It's like, what are you doing? Like, it doesn't make any fucking sense. Or like trying to pawn off like really, really low effort reskins is like something you should spend a bunch of money on. It's like, just, and then Tekken, they have the UE ball. They have the UE ball. And their whole season pass thing, it's just been a nightmare. So like even the big games, right? The games that in fighting game culture are like kind of too big to fail, they have all fucked up their monetization in some way. And so like Project L being free to play is presenting a perspective that fighting game devs are going to be put on notice. They're going to be put on notice because I think they're going to look at the success of a game like this and they're going to seriously consider like maybe we should go free to play for our next game. And that's a big deal, right? That's a really, really big deal, especially considering that fighting games' biggest detractor is getting people to play the game. This is getting people to play the game and then keeping them on the game. That is much easier to do when people don't have to pay $50 and they don't have to pay $60. When they can say, oh, that looks interesting, and they can actually just hop on the game and play with no strings attached. That is a huge deal for just getting volumes of people to actually try the game. And that goes a very, very long way. And so I think in that end, like it's gonna shift mentality with fighting game devs, or at least it should. If they look at this game's success and they don't like at least consider that for the future, I think they're foolish. I think it's just foolish. They're gonna do freemium model, right? I don't think any of the characters in the game are going to be paid. I think the only thing you're going to pay for is like cosmetics, and you know, I don't know if they're going to do like announcer packs and all that stuff. There's a lot of potential when it comes to League of Legends and how much stuff they have in that game and things that they could, you know, take ideas from and back and forth. There's just a lot, right? There's a lot of stuff. And so I think it absolutely will, like, you know, kind of put people on notice. They're going to be like, man, that looked really good. We want some of that. And then they'll start doing that. And then that's good for us, right? Only the consumer wins in this case. they win over everything. Okay, last thing is the culture, right? So people are talking about the kind of the clash between like, I'm gonna use this word, esports, right? The esports culture and FGC culture, right? First of all, people treat these things like they're mutually exclusive, right? They're not. They're not. So just rid yourself of that idea entirely. I've seen many people say that they're worried that with Riot coming in and doing this and that, you know, fighting games will kind of lose some of their culture, their identity. They won't be able to be their authentic self because Riot is involved. And I don't really understand where that comes from. Like, I think that a lot of fighting game players look at other esports. They look at like Valorant and they look at Rocket League and they look at the way like their productions are done, and maybe they judge it as being like not authentic. Like maybe they think it's like fake or fabricated, but I don't really think that's the case. I just think that when you have like big companies working with your game, you kind of have to like, there's like certain things you just can and can't do. And that's the case whether we're talking about Riot or we're talking about Capcom or we're talking about, you know, Bandai, or like that will always be the case. And so like I don't really understand like why people are so up in arms over this. People were like, oh, I'm gonna get fined for like swearing at a fighting game event. I don't think that's the case. You got to keep in mind that the people that make Project L, they're fighting game players, and I think that's a big deal. That's a really, really big deal. These are people that like are really, really ingrained in fighting game history. Like they are aware of the culture. They're aware of what is important to fighting game players, and kind of they're gonna do everything they can to preserve that culture. They would be dumb not to. Like the Cannon brothers, they run EVO, bro. Like there's not any, like how could you get more ingrained in fighting game culture than that, right? They just, how could you? How could you? The Cannon brothers, Apology Man, Yahozi, Marlin Pie, right? Like these are people that are us, right? They've been here the entire time, and they've been here for a long time. They're not new. They're not like new, like squeaky clean, like industry plants that are here to like subvert the culture of fighting games. That's not what they're there for, right? They've actually just been enjoying fighting games for a long ass time, and I assume that they will just do the best they can to make it a great fighting game, both inside and outside of the game. So like I don't really get where that comes from, but I don't think people should be nearly as worried as they are. Because like it's a big opportunity, right? This game is going to be huge. It's going to be like, you could check me on this. I think it's going to be the biggest fighting game by a pretty sizable margin. Like a pretty sizable margin. What that means to you could mean different things if we're talking about viewership, if we're talking about entrant counts. But like I said, the prospect of it being free is a huge deal. Like that is just already like such a game changer, right? That I can't see it not just kind of blowing everything else out of the water. And they're also coming out at a time where attention isn't going to be pulled as in many places. Like most big fighting game franchises have already released their new installments or their new games. So they're not releasing during like the peak of that, right? Because like the past year or so has been insane for fighting games. Like pretty much every major franchise has had like a big release, like damn near, right? They're coming out next year, and like there isn't a whole lot of like big releases that are next year. It's literally, I think it's just them, right? I mean like Hunter x Hunter is gonna come out, but like there's kind of a different stylistic approach with that. So yeah, I don't think they're gonna have much competition. I think they're doing something that no fighting game has ever done before. I think the IP carries a lot of weight as well. We've seen how much IPs can carry fighting games really hard. Dragon Ball FighterZ. Yeah, and so I think it kind of just has everything going for it. And I think like it will change things. It will change things. I think an overwhelming majority of the things that they will change will be for the better. And I think people should hope that that's the case, right? You shouldn't be one of those people like preying on its downfall, like hoping that it fucks up and it ruins this or that. Like if you're one of those people, or if you're hoping that it fails or people lose opportunities or this or that, you don't actually care about fighting games or the fighting game community, right? You're just in this for some ego trip. You're not in this for the good of the community. You're not in this for the good of the games themselves. You need to really, really check that shit, right? Because you're literally, that's what toxic is. That's like that's what toxic is when you're doing stuff like that. So I think that's like where I stand on this whole, you know, will Project L change things? Yeah, I think it will. And all we can really do is play the game, try to enjoy the game, and hope that it is as good as possible, right? That's all we ever can do, right? Anything outside of that is just extra.